Let's bring in Adam Parsons as those bosses at that prison in the West Bank move. What is happening where you are, Adam?
Yeah, Dan, first of all, very interesting, 70 prisoners released into Egypt. That means, by my calculation, there's probably 50 who have gone into Gaza, and there are 80 expected here in Ramallah. Example of how rapidly things can change in what is a tense situation. The last time I spoke to you, we were on a hill overlooking the Offa prison in what was actually a very relaxed atmosphere. As you can see, things have changed now. The Israeli military convoy that we were telling you about actually came up onto that hill, told us that we had to move. They've deployed tear gas down there to move people out of the way. And then when we were standing in the street just there a couple of minutes ago, there's a vehicle around the corner who started pointing a weapon at us to get us to move. So this area now is the focus of a lot of attention for the Palestinian end of this prisoner swap, because of the 200 who are being released, as we said, 70 have gone to Egypt. By my calculations, 50 have gone to Gaza. Those 120 have been convicted of what is the Israeli court's estimation the most serious offences, largely, I think, connected with murder and with killing. Then you have 80 others who are also convicted of serious offences, and in some cases have been in prison for a long time. Now, the figures that have been suggested would, according to my calculations, mean that these 200 prisoners have on average been incarcerated for over 14 years each. And some of the stories around them, is a man called Mohammed Al-Tous, who is from this area, who's been in prison since 1985 because of his affiliation with Fatah. There are a group of 3 brothers from Ramallah who are due to be released today, who have all served long sentences. And for people round here, these are effectively political prisoners, or people who have been in prison because of their support for what would be described here as Palestinian resistance. Of course, the Israelis would consider them to be terrorists, and there are many in Israel who are very uneasy at the idea of people being released who have been convicted of serious crimes and who have spent a long time in prison. So what is going to happen over the course of today is that, the Offa prison facility is actually more, it's over in that direction. And the prisoners who have been in various locations will be brought to Offa. That's I think, tear gas that you're hearing being deployed again there, will be brought in coaches towards the centre of Ramallah, and there will be family and friends meeting them. But it's the choreography around that which I think will be interesting to see. Already, clearly what we're seeing here is a demonstration, show of power by the Israeli military. That convoy that came out included 2 bulldozers, armoured personnel carriers, snatched vehicles, in order to show the people of this city that this time they mean business. Why? Well, last time these prisoners were released, there was enormous celebration in the centre of Ramallah, and that went down badly with the Israelis, who want there to be very few signs of public celebration. So prisoners, about 15 of them, who are actually being taken to Jerusalem, are, we understand, being taken in police vehicles and are going to be taken to the front door of the home, the house where they're going to live, and that they will then be effectively escorted in so that there is no public celebration. That is going to be very hard for them to achieve here in Ramallah. And in fact, as I speak to you now, I can see, let's move out here. There's coaches. The 2 coaches, I think, are on their way. We can see them through that fence there. Those are the coaches carrying the prisoners on their way into the city of Ramallah. They've come out a lot earlier than anybody had anticipated. That is tear gas being fired, but there you can see the coaches carrying the Palestinian prisoners. We assume it is in those coaches towards Ramallah. This is a lot earlier than anybody had anticipated. You can see one of those Israeli military vehicles is now turning around. There is a third coach going through, and then behind it, those are Red Crescent, Red Cross vehicles. You can hear around me the hooting of cars, that sense of celebration. And this is a sign we're going to see, I think, across Ramallah, is a sense of celebration that these prisoners have been returned to this city, here to the West Bank. You're hearing, of course, those bangs you're hearing, those are tear gas. Now, why would that be happening? Go back to that point that the Israeli military really do not want this to be seen as a party. They don't want this to be seen as a scene of celebration. Tear gas is their number one tool for dispersing crowds and to take people away from these scenes. So those coaches will now be going, it's not a long drive, into the heart of Ramallah, where those prisoners will be released. We, of course, will be headed along whatever the safe path is into the centre of Ramallah, and it will be a battle of wits between the Israelis, who really will not want big crowds to greet these prisoners, and of course the people of this area, who I think will be surprised, very surprised, to see how quickly this has happened, and will be hugely eager to greet these prisoners freed as they arrive here in Ramallah, in the West Bank. 120 prisoners serving the most serious sentences. They won't be here. These are the 80, next level down, but convicted in Israeli courts' minds of very serious offences. People who have spent, in some cases, decades in prison and who are now tasting freedom as part of this ceasefire deal. But also, as I said, there is this persistent sense of tension here in Ramallah and across the West Bank. And there are those in Israel who bemoan the release of these prisoners just as they welcome the release of those 4 hostages today.
Yeah, and Adam, just talk us through what the thought process is about where these prisoners end up, because if you've rightly pointed out, some will be in the West Bank, some in Egypt, some in Gaza. What is the thought process, the rationale for different prisoners being released in different places?
Okay, so the arithmetic of it is like this. Today, 200 Palestinian prisoners have been released, and they're in 2 groups. There are 80 who are going to be coming here who have been convicted of serious offences, but not the highest category. Then there's a group of 120 people who have been serving time convicted of the most serious offences, almost all in connection with some form of what the Israeli courts have deemed to be murder and terrorism. The Israeli authorities said that these people cannot be allowed to remain in Israeli territory, and so they've described them as being deported. Those people have been taken down to the south of the country and have either been sent to Gaza or have effectively been deported from Israel and put in the hands of the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptians have said that they will take them, but there are other countries, and the Egyptians don't want to take all of these people. So about a dozen are already going, we know, to Turkey. We know that negotiations with Qatar were going on, but our understanding is that the Qataris have said they don't want to take any of those prisoners. We know that Algeria and Morocco have been involved in negotiations about whether they will take some of those prisoners. Those people then have to effectively be outside of Israel territory for 3 years and can then apply to return subject to certain rules, notably that they haven't been involved in any terrorist activity, but also that the Shin Bet, the Israeli intelligence, authorises them to return. So those are the 2 groups. Clearly, the logic behind that, Darren, is that the Israeli government understands that for many, in Israel. It is simply unpalatable to have the most serious criminals allowed to live on Israeli territory and, in the mind of some, to continue to be a danger to the Israeli state. But there will be those who will say, A, you have released these people, and in the modern world, if they're guilty of terrorism, that is something they can orchestrate from abroad. There will be others who will say, well, these 80 are still guilty of terrorist offences. But these are people who, as I say, in some cases have been in prison for decades. In the case of Mohammed al-Tous, he has served very nearly 40 years in prison. The reason I'm looking behind me, we're just seeing that one of these Israeli snatch vehicles has just come back into this road, very similar to the one that earlier on was warning us away from these positions. So that is the logic, Darren, between those who have been effectively expelled from this area and those who are right now returning here to the West Bank.
And Adam, we're just going to show the viewers at home some pictures from Wadi Gaza where Palestinians, Gazans, effectively trying to get north. As part of the deal today, we had expected that they would be able to do so. Thousands have gathered there. Israel, at the moment, have said they're not prepared to do that because female civilian hostages have not been released today. They thought that was part of the deal. So while there are celebrations where you are, frustrations elsewhere.
Yeah, and look, this deal, this ceasefire deal, has infuriated some, delighted others. And I think it exposes so much of the fissures that run between this bitter conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians that, of course, predates what has happened in Gaza. You know, this is, was mentioned, Mohammed al-Tous was in prison since 1985. You know, there are people who have been released who have been involved in the first and the second intifadas. This is not about prisoners connected with what's happening in Gaza. This is about reopening the wounds that have divided Israel and Palestinians and indeed so much of the Middle East over the course of many painful decades. And it exposes some of those frustrations and many of those tensions. And I don't think anybody would pretend that this deal is perfect for either side. From an Israel perspective, well, they believe that the seizure of these hostages was a grievous and barbaric act, and that to have to pay to get those hostages back by releasing prisoners in vast numbers is a very painful deal.